Let's dive right in, starting with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, the king's pawn opening, a very standard and common setup. Now here's the first surprise. Instead of continuing with conventional moves, we play pawn to d4. This specific position is known as the center game, and you can probably guess why. It features 3 central pawns in the spotlight. At this point, most players will capture the pawn with pawn takes d4, and if they don't, it generally works in your favor. Why? Because you can simply take their central pawn, leaving them without one, which weakens their control of the center. Assuming they take the pawn, the move to play is pawn to f4. This is an unconventional choice, as most players in this position prefer development-oriented moves like knight to f3 or bishop to c4. However, this line introduces a more aggressive and unexpected dynamic to the center game. However, I am going to show you something a bit less common, but with a much higher win rate. Alright, we play pawn to f4 here, and black will often respond with knight to c6, attempting to support their extra pawn on d4. Since they are up a pawn, it makes sense for them to try to hold on to it. Now, we want to apply some pressure to the pawn with knight to f3. Black will typically defend it with bishop to c5, and at this point, we can see that recapturing the pawn immediately is unlikely. Black's pawn on d4 is well defended by both the bishop and knight, and we do not have any forcing moves to attack it further. Instead of fixating on that pawn, we are going to shift our focus. We play bishop to d3, continuing our development. There is a specific reason for placing the bishop on d3, but we will explore that in a few moves. Alright, typically black will continue developing. Let's say they play knight to f6, a very normal developing move that you will see often in this position. At this point, you want to castle kingside, ensuring your king's safety. A large majority of the time, black will also castle kingside, and believe it or not, that is a crucial mistake for black. Once this position is reached, black is already in a tough spot. Now, here is the reason why we placed our bishop on d3 earlier. It perfectly sets up the move pawn to at5, aiming the bishop directly at h7. This creates a beautiful and dangerous attacking setup. What happens next in most games is that black will place their knight in the center of the board, typically on knight to e4, thinking they are counterattacking. This sets the stage for a famous tactic known as the Greek gift sacrifice. You play bishop takes h7, delivering check. Black doesn't have many choices here. They either capture the bishop with king takes h7 or move the king to h8. Your response is the same in either case. Assuming they capture the bishop with king takes h7, you follow up with knight to g5, giving check. At this point, black is in serious trouble and has very limited options. 1. If they move the king, their position becomes completely exposed, and you continue your attack with devastating effect. 2. If they capture the knight with their queen, you recapture with your pawn, gaining material and leaving yourself in a completely winning position. No matter what black chooses, this sequence leaves you with a dominant position, so you'll be very happy with the result. The only square the black king can move to without being immediately checkmated is king to g8. However, if they make a bigger mistake and try to escape by moving the king to g6, you have a brilliant response. In this position, you play pawn to f5, delivering a check. Notice that your bishop on d3 guards the knight on g5, so the black king has no safe squares to escape to except king to h6. Once the king moves to h6, your position is still completely secure because the bishop continues to guard the knight. At this point, you calmly bring your queen to g4, creating a straightforward threat of queen to h4, delivering checkmate. Black has almost no way to stop this, and their position is essentially lost. They are completely stuck, and checkmate is inevitable. Now, going back to the previous position, if the black king instead tries to move directly to king to h6, you bring your queen to d3. This sets up a devastating threat. Queen to h7, a mate in 1. Black has no effective way to stop this threat. Most players at this point may try desperate measures, such as capturing the knight on g5 with their queen, hoping for the best. If they give up their queen for your knight, you are in a winning position and can confidently proceed. Alternatively, if black tries to block your queen's path with pawn to g6, you still have a decisive move. You simply play queen to h3, delivering a check. Once the black king moves, you follow up with queen to h7, delivering checkmate. If black chooses the best defensive move, which is king to g8, the brilliance of the Greek gift tactical sequence continues. You now play queen to h5, immediately threatening checkmate in 1 with queen to h7. Black's best response in this situation, and I am not exaggerating, is to sacrifice their queen by capturing the knight on g5. If they do this, you are still in a winning position because trading your knight for their queen puts you significantly ahead in material. However, most players are unlikely to part with their queen so easily. Instead, they will typically play rook to e8, hoping to create an escape route for their king. This move looks like a decent attempt because if you proceed with queen to h7, their king can escape and there will no longer be a forced checkmate in the immediate sequence. But here's the clever move to remember. Instead of playing queen to h7, you take advantage of the rook's move by capturing the pawn on f7 with your queen. This keeps the attack alive while maintaining strong control over the board, putting black in an even worse position. All right. After the sequence continues, the black king is forced to move to king to h8. You then bring your queen back to h5, forcing the king to retreat to king to g8. From there, you play queen to h7, forcing king to f8. Next, you deliver queen to h8, checking the king and forcing it to move to g8, king to e7. The critical difference now, compared to doing this earlier, is that after you play queen to g7, there is no longer a pawn on f7 to block your attack. This means you deliver a clean checkmate as the black king has no escape squares. All of this happens in just 15 moves, allowing you to secure victory with this little-known gambit from the center game. Now let's rewind a bit to explore some alternative possibilities. Let's go back to this position where black plays knight to c6, which is by far the most common response. After you respond with knight to f3, we'll look into other variations, as not every player will follow the ideal sequence, such as playing bishop to c5. Sometimes black may try to get fancy by playing bishop to b4, delivering a check. Here, you need to be a bit careful to avoid making a mistake, but there is a straightforward and effective response. You play pawn to c3 to block the check. Black will almost certainly capture the pawn with bishop takes c3, which actually works in your favor. This exchange helps you develop your knight to c3, improving your position. In many cases, black will follow this up by trading their bishop for the knight on c3. The primary reason for this is that if they don't, your knight will eventually jump to the center of the board, likely knight to d4, after you castle, becoming a dominant piece. Black will want to eliminate it while they still can. If black captures your knight with bishop takes c3, you recapture with your pawn to bxc3. While this pawn might not seem ideal, it's not a significant problem because black is not in a position to effectively attack it. From here, most players will play pawn to d6, aiming to prevent your push of pawn to a5, which would otherwise create a strong initiative for you. If black decides to play knight to f6 at this point, I recommend you immediately play pawn to a5 and follow up with bishop to d3, setting up the powerful attacking structure we discussed earlier. Most likely black will respond with pawn to d6, aiming to prevent your pawn advance to a5. That's perfectly fine. You simply develop your bishop to d3, and after black plays knight to f6, you continue with castling kingside. Now, if black also castles kingside, this is where things start to look very familiar. You get to play pawn to e5, opening up your attack. Let's say black captures with dx a5, you recapture with pawn to e5, and black responds with knight to d5. At this point, you execute the same tactic as before, the Greek gift sacrifice. You play bishop takes h7, delivering a check. If black captures the bishop with king takes h7, you follow up with knight to g5, giving check. From here, the pattern repeats. Black either sacrifices their queen to save the king or attempts to retreat the king. If they sacrifice the queen, you are in a completely winning position. If they try to run with the king, it leads to a gruesome finish, as there is no real escape, and checkmate is inevitable. The sequence showcases the devastating power of the Greek gift sacrifice, leading to yet another crushing victory for white. Thanks for watching this video till end. If you found this video helpful, then like and subscribe the channel. See you in another video.